Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. My name is Tahrir Hamdi, and I'd like to welcome you to the student webinar on the Global Palestine Solidarity Movement. And thank you for joining us today for the very first webinar organized by the Awareness Raising Action Group of Act4Pal, the Academic Action Network for Palestine. Act4Pal is a growing network of academics, researchers, and educators committed to standing against the ongoing genocides, classicide, and ecocide being inflicted upon the Palestinian people by the Zionist entity. Crimes that have persisted for nearly 2 years, with full backing from Western colonial powers. We are united in our belief that the struggle for a free Palestine from the river to the sea is not only urgent, it is foundational to the broader global movement for justice, liberation, and human dignity.
Our network and the Palestine Solidarity Movement must continue to grow. This is a fight for justice and freedom. And this is not a cliche. The Zionist entity is totally supported by a modern colonial order that has legitimized the extermination of an entire people, their culture, their land, and their history. This colonial order is sustained by the complicity of a powerful network of hegemonic control exercised by means of legacy media, AI technology, and advanced weaponry now being unleashed on displaced Palestinians living in tents. These same forces dominate international law and hold veto power at the United Nations, shielding the Zionist genocidal regime from accountability. Today's webinar, student webinar on the Global Palestine Solidarity Movement, brings together student and alumni leaders from around the world, brave voices that are shaping the future of this growing movement, often from the front lines of university encampments and protests. These are voices of resistance, resilience, and radical hope. Their experiences, organizing work, and unwavering solidarity reflect the global nature of the Palestinian cause, what many around the world see as their cause. Palestine is now a world cause. As the Palestinian poet Mahmoud so poignantly reminds us, quoting, "From this day on, he who does not become Palestinian in his heart will never understand his true moral identity." End of quote. We open this webinar by acknowledging not only Israel's intentional starvation of the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza and the daily and hourly killing and bombing of people both in Gaza and more quietly on the West Bank, but also the intentional and targeted destruction of Palestinian culture, education, and knowledge systems, what is known as classicide. It is an attempt to erase a people not just physically, but intellectually, spiritually, and historically. It is fitting then that we begin today with Dr. Wissam Amer, a visiting research at Cambridge and a co-founding member of Act4Pal, whose work addresses precisely this critical issue. Dr. Amer will speak to us about de-scholasticide, a vital concept in practice aimed at resisting the obliteration of Palestinian intellectual life and reclaiming space for learning, liberation, and knowledge rooted in Palestinian struggle. After Dr. Wissam Amer's brief presentation on descholasticide, we will hear from our student and alumni activists who will share with us their experiences and be interviewed by our two hosts for the evening. Professor Dina Matar, a specialist in political communication and Arab media at SOAS, and Dr. Nadine Najjab, a senior lecturer in Palestine Studies at the University of Exeter, and both of them are co-founding members of ActforPal as well. But now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Wissam Amer. Dr. Wissam, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Tahrir. And I'm deeply honored to join this urgent and this important meeting and conversation. Thank you so much for your great work to organize this event, and thank also fellow participants and extend a special message of solidarity to Palestinian students and academics enduring the unimaginable, unbelievable situation in Gaza. As you know, Gaza is offline now. Just a few minutes ago, I was in another meeting with actually with Cardiff University to host, in a way, to push the university to host Palestinian academic, and unfortunately, he could not join us really in, I would say, a normal way, but he joined us in a very challenging situation. He had to go from Deir el-Balah, from the central area, to Khan Yunis on a cart and donkey, so he could join the network using Israeli mobile network, and it was very hard to hear him speaking from Gaza. So we send our special solidarity to our colleagues and students in Gaza. Also, I'd like to express deep gratitude to the students at the University of Cambridge who held two encampments last week and the week before, despite facing the injunctions. Also, I would like to express my gratitude to the students in Berlin who face and challenge the brutal police behavior, during their encampment and the protest at the campuses. Special gratitude to all students, movements, groups, individuals raising the Palestinian voice and protesting the complicity of the universities, as well as the rejecting and fighting against the genocide. So your acts of solidarity are not only seen. Actually, they are felt by those of the front lines. I hear a lot from colleagues in Gaza, from my students in Gaza, and then I see how much really appreciate the actions of the students around the world in their support. Actually, what is happening in Gaza is not only a military assault, it's not only genocidal war in terms of military operations and actions. It is an all-out attack on the very possibility of a future for Palestinians. It's a direct attack on the educational facilities, schools, universities, libraries, and archives, museums as well, places meant for our growth, for our development, and of course, imagination. All these have been flattened, not only destroyed, but also have been flattened. Israel has not just disrupted the education in Gaza, also Israel has targeted the education. So, as Professor Tahrir mentioned, the term scholasticide refers to the Israeli systematic destruction of Palestinian education. So today, this term has taken on its most devastating meaning. Entire universities bombed, thousands of students and educators, academics, researchers killed or detained, educational infrastructure completely erased. Physically in Gaza, well, in Gaza now, the campuses physically are completely destroyed. So scholasticide can be seen as an educational genocide, not just collateral damage. It is a strategic objective. It is not only about buildings, it's about the dismantling the future, erasing a generation's chance or opportunities to learn, to lead, and to live. Today, briefly, I'm presenting this approach, the scholasticide, because it's, from my point of view, it is a way to respond to the systematic destruction. I propose, or we propose, the scholasticide, a term that captures a vision of systematic reconstruction and strategic solidarity. So we need a systematic reconstruction to respond to the systematic construction. And of course, we need a strategic solidarity. And solidarity is not, or should not be seen only in the views of empathy, sympathy, or human feelings, of course, are important, but we need to take strategic actions. Where scholasticide aims to destroy, the scholasticide calls us to build back deliberately, justly, and more collectively. This is a call for academic solidarity, not silence, action-oriented support, not symbolic sympathy, and systematic rebuilding, not sporadic aid. This means demanding a ceasefire now to hold the mass murder and allow students to return to learning, allow academics, researchers to teaching, supporting Palestinian academic voices through publishing, partnerships, and fellowships, backing e-learning initiatives in Gaza and in exile, of course. The only viable solution for the moment in Gaza is the online learning or the e-learning. Of course, we call for creating scholarship pathways and remote learning programs for displaced Gaza students. Students can go or can move actually, as well as all people in Gaza, from the north to the central area, from central area back to the north, or go to the to Rafah in the south. And of course, we call for holding Israeli universities and government accountable. Israeli universities are complicit with their government. So we call for holding them accountable through disclosure, divestment, and principled partnerships. The more systematic our solidarity is, the more powerful and permanent its impact. Around the world, students are leading, from the incumbents in New York to solidarity statements in London, in Cambridge, in Oxford, in Sydney, in Seoul, in Munich. These encampments are great and are leading also to digital campaigns. Of course, these movements test the values we say we believe in: justice, freedom, academic integrity. students or you are not only witnesses to the genocide, you are actors in the struggle against it. And this is how high we claim that the scholars decide to be in a very systematic reconstruction and strategic solidarity. We should not be seen only as witnesses to what is happening, what's going on in Palestine or in Gaza. We should be the actors in the struggle and against scholasticide, against genocide. Unfortunately, Gaza students are not preparing for careers. As you know, they are preparing to survive the next airstrike. And this moment, your solidarity can help transform survival into revival. And without strategic action and solidarity, this would be very difficult, I think. We stress the importance of coordinated international efforts, initiatives, groups, students' movements to reopen Palestinian universities. Without coordination, without collective work, this would be also challenging. So this is not just our struggle, it's yours too, as well as students. In the face of the scholasticide, let's commit to the scholasticide. It's actions of or systematic actions of reconstruction. Rebuilding what was destroyed, imagining what was denied, and acting on what is right. So this would include support Palestinian students, raise their voice and your voice as students, and push your institutions. I have participated in some or many events, many meetings or lectures, and I always have been asked, mostly in every single session or meeting, what can we do, especially from the universities. I always say universities know exactly what they can do or what they should do. They don't need advice. If they want to do something, they can do it. Let me end this talk with the words of the late Dr. Rifat El-Arir. He was a colleague and a friend at the Islamic University. As you know, he was killed in Gaza. If I must die, you must live to tell my story. Let's live up that call, not only by telling the story, but by changing its ending. Let's work together. Let's de-scholasticide. Let's collaborate and build a network and fight for freedom and justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tahrir, do you want us to come in now? Okay. Thank you, Wissam. That was very important talk, and I appreciate what you said, particularly at this moment, which is a moment of total blackout in Gaza. And we had hoped that we would do this webinar. We had some attendees from Gaza, but no worries. We will pass on the recordings to them later on, but we give them our solidarity as well through this meeting. But what I wanted to say before we start asking questions or trying to make it into a conversation is that I appreciate that some of the students joining us don't want to be identified, so they want to keep their camera off or they want to have their names not known. So I do appreciate that, and I hope that the audience who are joining can also appreciate this fact. This is because of a situation of extreme silencing, extreme pushback against Palestinian voices and against the production of knowledge about Palestine. And I think that the protest movement has worked, kind of bravely to try and push against that. But what I wanted to ask, and perhaps any one of you who are joining as panelists from the student body, And before I move on, I just wanted to say that the students joining us come from different parts of the world. So we appreciate that as well. But what I wanted to ask is a general question, which is a question about the journey to becoming a part of the protest movement in support of Palestine, in support of Palestinian students. So perhaps any one of you would like to come in. We're going to make our questions short and general, and then maybe through the answers we might be able to become more specific. So anyone who'd like to respond from the students, please do so. Whether you want to keep your screen off, that's fine. But if also you want to have your screen on, then that would be appreciated as well. Okay, Barry, please do come in.
Hello, everybody. You guys can hear me all right? Yes, okay. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be around the world. My name is Barry Mahmoud. I'm a Palestinian American residing in the US. I am a recent graduate from Montclair State University in New Jersey, where I served for 2 years as the president of the Students for Justice in Palestine. I also currently serve as the Youth Engagement Coordinator at the Palestinian American Community Center in New Jersey. And I've served in this role for about 1.5 years now. And to answer your question, Professor Dina, I mean, it's been inherent, especially as a Palestinian, for us to take part in the movement for Palestinian liberation as a whole, even before the genocide in Gaza began. I personally can track my activism to when I was still a teenager in high school, when the bombardment in 2021 on Gaza was going on, and the violence against the residents in Sheikh Jarrah. I believe I like to believe that I began my journey as a student activist then, and hopefully to continue to do so in whatever role I can now that I'm a graduate. But something that is at least that I've noticed within the past 1.5 years since the genocide in Gaza began is that the current movement, the current student movement, the current protest movement, for many people who, whether they began within the movement post October 7th or they started prior, there has been a shift in mindset for everybody, and myself included. Speaking towards at least the people who began in the movement post October 7th, the shift obviously stems from the images that we see on a daily basis from Gaza, and wanting to act in some type of way to refute complicity in that, especially here in the U.S., where we constantly say that the U.S. is the heart of the belly of the beast, is the heart of the empire, and the U.S. being the #1 arms supplier to the Israeli occupation forces. The fact that our tax dollars here in the U.S. go towards bombing civilians in Gaza and killing civilians, it creates a much more inherent need to act. And so, one thing that I've noticed in particular have been, aside from people within the movement, just supporters, those in solidarity, those who attend a rally or a protest here and there. You see people who didn't even know what Palestine was, which obviously to us that's insane. How do you not know what Palestine is? How have you never heard of Palestine before? But it's something that we've been able to see now, is that there are people who didn't know what Palestine was, couldn't point at it on a map, but now they're attending protests. They're speaking with the people around them. They're telling them that there's a genocide going on. They're telling them that, Israel is committing a genocide against Palestinians. And this is something that we couldn't have seen before. This is something that couldn't have happened before the genocide in Gaza began. And it's obviously it's unfortunate the magnitude of destruction that it took for it to open up so many people's eyes. But it's the sad reality. It's a sad reality that a genocide of an estimate of hundreds of thousands of people is what it took for the entire world to see exactly what is happening to Palestinians. And on that note, we've also been able to see the reactions to such outrage. Speaking specifically here in the U.S., one thing that I always like to make note of is that it never really mattered what type of administration it was, whether it had been the Biden administration or the current Trump administration. If anything, the reactions to student protesters last year by the Biden admin is what set up the current repression that we see. And I wanna make note of the protests happening across the country currently at this moment, such as in Los Angeles and in Texas, and talk about the parallels in which Immigration and Customs Enforcement now are attacking protesters who are anti-ICE, anti-deportation, anti-abuse of power. But on the same level, we see these same strategies, these same tactics are the things that are used against Palestinians in Palestine as well. Because one thing that we always talk about here in our activist spaces is something called the deadly exchange. The exchange of tactics used between the Israeli occupation forces and U.S. military, police force, federal agents. This exchange of tactics is something that is used both on minority communities here in the U.S. as well as our own family members in Palestine and in the West Bank, and as was mentioned prior, the use of AI now. One thing that the Secretary of State Marco Rubio mentioned was how they're going to start utilizing AI to scan social media pages for anti-Israel sentiments, and use that to crack down on pro-Palestinian activists. We saw the detention of Mahmoud Khalil. We saw various activists out of Columbia University and across the country. Mahmoud, who's still detained right now. All of these are concerted efforts. And I don't know how much. I don't want too much time, but.
No, we'll come back to you, but thank you so much for starting the discussion on this and several points that raise further questions. I would like to invite Watan, and then I thought Mouna wanted to say something. So please, Watan, do come in, and sorry, Nadia, but we'll take this round first, and then we'll come to your questions.
مساء الخير, buenas noches. ¿Está bien la traducción?
Masha al-khair, Watan, we can hear you.
Ya. Bueno, mi nombre es Watan. Yo soy palestino, formado por la Revolución Cubana. Actualmente soy pediatra, activista político y organizador y líder estudiantil cuando era todavía estudiante. La diferencia en el terreno, digamos,
Excuse
entre...
me, Watan, I have a question. We're hearing you in Spanish, but so
Do you want me to speak in English?
Can you?
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
my name is Watan. I will start over again. My name is Watan. I'm a Palestinian and trained by the Cuban Revolution. Now I'm a pediatrician. yeah, I'm graduated from Cuba. The difference between our case in Cuba and other places, as Barry said in the Belly of the Beast, that we have the support of the Cuban people and the Cuban Revolution. Uh, Palestine for Cuban people is one of the most just cause who always Cuban fought for. Just 6 months after the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, Che Guevara visited Gaza in the early 60s, and from there the support of the Palestinian cause as an internationalist cause and liberation liberation movement started. In Gaza and in Cuba, we work as a Palestinian youth organization, and we articulate with a lot of movement and organizations in Latin America, such as Brazil, Venezuela, Chile, and other Caribbean and Latin American countries. The thing that we learned in this past 2 years that the we recover in certain things that the identity, the Palestinian identity is not, it's not anymore regional or religious identity. It's like um, struggle identity. Whoever who fight or struggle for Palestine, he's Palestinian by struggle by in this identity. In this past two years, we learned a lot of what how to share this identity and this in Spanish we say mínimo común, like the least common between us, that we have, that Palestine will free us all, and the main contradiction and the main enemy is the Zionist, international Zionist and imperialism and Arab reactionary. And this contradiction is now in the main scenario that everyone from our comrades and friends and brothers and sisters in Cuba and in Latin America sees by the image of genocidal Israel are committing now. One of the main strategy that we apply in our organizing in our movement is the battle of ideas. Whenever we want to make an activity like to paint a mural, to paint such a wall to support the Palestinian cause, we do it with children, with Cuban children. And before that, we sit with them and educate them about Palestine. In program, we like stole from Rabab Abdel Hadi. Dr. Rabab Abdel Hadi is teaching Palestine. We teaching Palestine every time, every day. And by this activities, the solidarity movement across all the generation, from the children, the 9, 10 years old Cubans to their fathers and grandfathers. And something that we like learn that the imperialism, Zionism can kill our brothers and sisters in Gaza, but the Gazan students in Cuba, they have a struggle spirit that they give us the whole time. I remember that one of our comrades has had his father killed, assassinated in Gaza with 300 family members, and he was the first one in the march against the U.S. Embassy with the president of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel. And it's like something like a emotional thing, but at the same time, it's like learn us how to be the steadiness, like and that to be no matter what happened, we will be there for our cause.
Okay, thank you, Watan. I'm sorry to have make you speak in English. Next time I will know how to use the translation thing. Mouna, did you want to come in before I pass on to Nadia? No? Nadia, do you want to come in with some questions to?
Yes, I mean, thank you so much. It's great to hear, you know, your experiences and from Abdel Bari and Watan. It's interesting because Palestine has always been a global issue and always intersects with other movements. So it's we've always said during last year, when after post October 7, that this evoked the 60s, 70s, and even early 80s, because this is when Palestine was international, lots of activities and solidarity. So post October 7 probably revived this, bringing Palestine as a global issue intensified, let's say. So I really appreciate your experience in Cuba, for example, how through cultural activities you were able to teach about Palestine. Abdel Bari also mentioned about their role also in teaching about Palestine. What I noticed during all this activism is that not only Palestine became more and more a global issue, but also the events of October 7 were situated within the historical context of Palestine. And we started to call Israel all the time in our talks, in our activities, as a settler colonial state. My question to you is, how did you manage, especially at this age of social media and internet? I think it played a role. What kind of activities have you held to teach about Palestine, and what are the challenges that you faced from the senior management and the universities and even the governments, Western governments? And how did you, and how do you, because it's ongoing, how do you mitigate these challenges? I know that you've been linked also your activities to the community, as we did here in the University of Exeter, which is important. So can you tell us, can you shed a light on what did you do, how did you mitigate this, how did you face the challenges, and also what your demands were to the universities, and if you have achieved any demands?
Anyone from the group would like to answer? Yeah, Mouna, please come in, and then Watan.
And there's Ashley as well, and
do you want Watan to answer that question first? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Nadine, come in.
I think, Mouna, we can hear you, if you want to start.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. My name is Mouna El Kahla, and I'm Tunisian by birth. I want to thank you, everybody, for actually inviting me to this wonderful platform. I'm going to respond to the question of first, how did my personal involvement with activism for Palestine, and the second, what did I do in terms of like platform in higher education or activism to basically highlight the Palestinian cause. The Palestinian cause is very, very personal to me. I'm Tunisian, as I said, by birth. And I live 7 minutes away from the place that Israel bombed in the 80s, when they bombed the headquarters of the PLO in Tunisia. But I haven't lived in Tunisia all my life. I lived in the Gulf, and that's another point of entry for connecting with Palestine. I grew up in the early 80s. In the first Intifada, I was in primary school. I studied with Palestinian students, refugees from every camp you can imagine, from Lebanon, from Syria, from Jordan. And then my mom used to say all the time that basically we actually faced displacement during the Iraq-Kuwait war, and that's actually what made it personal for me, because every time my mom used to say, we have a state to go back, but the Palestinian friends, your friends in your classroom, have nowhere to go. And this is how I always question that. You know, I know that Hannah Arendt says that rights are given by the state to the citizens, but what about the stateless? Where do they go? And why do we accept the status quo? Because when the Iraq-Kuwait war happened, I was really young, and this was like one of my biggest traumas. My mom was a nurse, and she was enlisted, basically, so we faced the danger of her actually leaving the house for one of her night shifts and never coming back. And so the idea of war for me is not theoretical, despite the fact that I'm not Palestinian, I'm Tunisian, and I'm sheltered from all the pain that the Palestinians go through. But my heart goes to them. This is the point of entry of actual empathy and solidarity. What did I do? I moved from the Gulf, where mobilization was and protest is not allowed, to Poland last year. And when I moved to Poland, I noticed that in my university, I was studying as a full-time Polish student, studying the language. I noticed that there was lack of interest in mobilization for Palestine in the city I was living in. I live in the fourth biggest city, Lublin. And unlike Warsaw or Krakow or Poznan, where they have active encampment, there's a little bit of silence, and there's in my university, literally Palestine does not exist. Like, I went to the celebration of Christmas and nothing was met, despite the story of the birth of Jesus was basically in Palestine. Even that was erased, you know. So and this the starting point for me needing to do something within the university, within, you know, the academic circle, is when one of my teachers told me to my face that she's happy that Donald Trump got elected, because now no, she was happy that the Palestinian genocide was ongoing, because at least that actually deviates the attention from Ukraine-Poland war. For me, this was like the ultimate ignorance, and I felt like we needed to do something within the community. I joined an academic collective within another university, which actually helped connected me to a broader network of solidarity here in Poland. The network is called Academia dla Palestina, which means Academics for Palestine. This helped me network with people in Poznan, in Warsaw, in Krakow. And before the end of last year, and because the genocide, despite my hopes, were still going on, I decided to start a big event in our municipality. So I connected with a cultural center, and I started a festival, a literature and film festival that was supposed to actually highlight the Palestinian cause. We constantly said, this is not entertainment, this is basically educating people, bringing them to the cause and bringing them to a place where ways of mobilizations and tools of mobilizations are given to them. We highlighted the collective, the student collective that I worked with. We gave them an entire panel, and I was happy that that happened, because despite the fact that the students are still young and they lack the experience, they have all the social media tools that connects to a young audience. For example, one of the platforms we highlighted, which were the students were promoting, a platform here in Poland called Cactus, which is a legal platform that actually tries, and this is what the students kept stressing, that we must bring Polish dual citizens who work in the IDF, who serve in the IDF, they must face legal action. And this was one of the venues that, and one of the platforms that can be used militantly to bring for a call of action. The festival was a success. It was not meant to be an international one, but it ended up being with international participation. And for me, it was an interesting way to keep people captive. Like, they're coming for most of the events in the festival were free, except the viewing of No Other Land was just priced at a very minimal price. But it was very important to have a captive audience who is coming with questions, and maybe not to answer these questions fully, but to walk them through, how did Poland get here? Poland hasn't, to highlight the fact that the history that Poland experiences at the current point was not always the case. Poland was not always pro-Israel. Poland did not always have the reason of the state, the German reason of state built into their governmentality. So it was important to actually walk the audience through art, through literature, through the letters, through this wonderful project called Letters for Palestinian Children, to walk them through to walk them through the journey that Poland took, and made it align right now completely with Israel. And that in itself, like, knowledge here in itself is powerful. I know that I went on protest and we were heckled and yelled at, but I was surprised that this is like a festival, and yet I also received threats during a festival that was for art and culture. And if that shows you anything, it shows you that art and culture is so threatening, because it really decolonizes and creates a space of knowledge and action and call for action. So despite the fact that this was like a humble attempt at giving to actually combat and to fight the genocide from where I stand, I feel it did something to the community, because it was hosted in the cultural center of the municipality. It was like a real official event. And now I just before talking to you, I Googled the Palestinian embassy, and I saw our event on their website.
Yeah.
It's one of the first
Amazing.
things that see, yeah, it's one of the first things that you see. And it's for anyone who Googles Palestine now in Poland, they will see that. They will see that there is a connection with Palestine and a connection with the resistance and the Palestinian cause in Poland that we really should bring back.
I think this is amazing, Mouna, and it's a reminder that individual steps like that do make a difference. So it's amazing. Well done, and I think it gives hope to people to initiate and start. A reminder, as I said, that it will make a difference. I think.
And Nadia, it was, the event cost us 1,500 euros. It was literally run on the charity and the goodness of the artists who gave their films for free.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Mouna. Shall we move on to Nadine, I think, next? And I think then Ashley. But let's start with Nadine. Are you ready?
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, ActforPal, for organizing this very important webinar. My name is Nadine. I was involved in the UCL encampment. I am now a graduate of UCL. Not that I'm overly joyed to be a graduate from a university that has investments in a lot of Israeli companies and companies that are complicit in the current genocide. I'm going to answer the question of education and putting this into context. Firstly, I'm just going to read out the 3 demands that we had from our encampment when we launched in May 2024. We had 3 clear demands: divest from companies complicit in the genocide of Palestinians and upholding the system of apartheid, condemn Israeli war crimes and crimes against humanity, and pledge to aid in rebuilding the education sector destroyed by Israel in an act of ethnic cleansing and genocide, and expand UCL scholarships to Palestinian students. This was our first publication that we did after, and we said we do this in the honor of all the innocent souls lost to the actions of the terrorist Israeli regime, in memory of our esteemed alumnus, Dr. Rifat Al-Adir, and all the innocent men, women, and children. I think that gives an idea of why we started our encampment and in what intentions we started our encampment, which I think is very, very important, because the response that came from the management was completely disproportionate. Like it was mentioned previously, Palestine has not always been at the forefront of the global justice movement. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. After October 7th, a lot of people who maybe even were Zionists before, their stance changed because they saw Israel for what it is. It's the genocidal entity that puts death before life. And ensuring that this was taught to people that joined the Palestine Solidarity Movement, especially on our campus, was extremely important to us, which is why one of the first things that we did after we launched our encampment was set up a library. And in this library, we had books that taught people about Palestine, Palestine's connections to other causes. We actually had Maqam Books, which is an independent Palestinian-owned bookstore here in London, which I highly recommend if you ever need any books for about anything, really. They came to our encampment and they lent us books. And at any time during the encampment, there was at least 4 people that were reading a book, which I think, not just because we're students, but because people wanted to genuinely learn about Palestine and put it into a global context and put October 7th into a context, and to understand that this didn't happen in a vacuum. Acts of resistance don't happen in a vacuum. This is not me, just for the sake of everyone, that I am not praising what happened on October 7th, but it is important to understand that this did not happen in a vacuum. In addition to this, we also wanted to host a series of teach-ins from professors that we were so lucky to have contact with in London, being, you know, in the heart of, you know, education. Unfortunately, external speakers were extremely limited at our encampment, especially, but also before that. Students Justice for Palestine was a registered organization within the university, and when they tried to host certain speakers, they were denied from doing so because they had quote unquote terrorist connections. External events that did actually take place were extremely monitored. There were sometimes police that were called because they decided, you know, universities decided that that was necessary. I think it's also really important that I highlight that it is an absolute privilege that we are still able to continue with our education, because there are so many students in Gaza that don't have the access to their education anymore because their universities have been reduced to rubble by Israel. So while these issues have been annoying, they are extremely problematic, and universities need to learn to do better, because they pride themselves on being, well, especially UCL, it calls itself London's Global University. It prides itself on this, yet it's suffering away from its Palestinian students. So it is a privilege to be able to even have these problems. And just to finish off what I was just saying here about our demands, there is one demand that, well, a small part of a demand that we achieved, and that is that UCL has divested from Amitech, which is an arms company that is complicit in war crimes across the world, and especially Israeli war crimes in Gaza. This is a small victory, but we do not stop here. We will continue the fight, because UCL still has a proud partnership with Tel Aviv University, and also with BAE Systems, which is an engineering company which makes parts for planes and engineering equipment, which is then used to kill Palestinians. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm sure I'll come in after another question. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nadine. Really interesting. I know you've done more and more in UCL, but I think this is a good summary of what you've done and what you have achieved. I'll turn to Dina. I think Professor Dina, would you like to ask questions?
I think Ashley wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. I'm a little bit sick, so bear with me. I'm sorry for my voice. First, I just want to thank ActforPal for organizing this and inviting me. And thank you to all the speakers and listeners as well for their activism and for participating. I'm Ashley Dell'Orso. I'm a PhD student from the US, but I'm studying in Portugal at the University Institute of Lisbon. And I'm here representing Estudantes pela Palestina. That's our student collective at the university. So I just want to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing as a student collective in the last 2 years. So in April last year, a small group of students from our collective released a petition and an open letter to our university admin, urging them to publicly call for a ceasefire and to allow a conversation with us about several demands that we had. The petition garnered around 500 signatures from faculty, staff, and students. And then in May, the University Climate Justice Student Collective, which are trained in occupying spaces and in de-escalation tactics, they started an encampment within the Faculty of Psychology at our university to demand a fossil-free university and also to meet our demands as the student collective Estudantes pela Palestina. So what happened with that encampment encampment is that it sadly only lasted a few days due to being violently disrupted by the police, which resulted in the arrest of about 8 students, and they were detained overnight, released the next day. There were about 5 other encampments in Lisbon and more across Portugal. However, our student collective is the only one in Portugal who have successfully gotten any demands met, even though our demands have not been fully met, more like half met. So after the delivery of our petition in June 2024 to the rectorate, she then wrote a short article in a local newspaper, and she called this her public statement, which was one of our demands that we asked for. And then we again asked her for an actual public statement because she wrote it as a private citizen and she didn't write it in connection to the university. We also requested a meeting with her, and we sent an agenda to her to let her know what we wanted to discuss. And so we showed up to the meeting and she wasn't there. She sent 2 of her vice rectors in her place, and we sat in a dark room to discuss our demands. And so the demands that we discussed were a stronger, more public statement to review and cut ties with any Israeli faculties or institutions. We know of 2 partnerships at our university, one that's in a Horizon Europe project. It's called REACT, and it hosts 2 Israeli institutional partners, Hebrew University and the Volcani Institute. And then secondly, a new Marie Curie doctoral network. It's called the MATCH Project, and it's a consortium of different countries that includes Israel. Next, we wanted to start a working group with professors and students for the creation of exchange programs and a scholarship initiative for students and professors from Gaza. And finally, we wanted to create the establishment of a Palestine Studies Observatory. So basically what happened is the university found it too cumbersome and time-consuming to go through the internal bureaucracy of creating some sort of public statement. And so they said no to that initially. And then later on, when we got professors involved, we created a student professor action group because we knew maybe if we had some tenured professors to help us, then they would meet our demands and take us more seriously. So eventually we found out that the rector was interested in this idea of a scholarship program, which is similar to what our university has done in the past for Ukrainian, Syrian, and Afghani refugees. And we initially were told that the university could only do it if other Portuguese universities were also on board, which we found out was a lie when we spoke to some union professors, that each university has its own autonomy to create scholarship programs. So basically, throughout the whole negotiation process, there was a lot of either kind of passive silencing, as in people would ignore our contacts, or they would tell us lies to delay the process. And eventually, the professors that we were working with got a second meeting, and the rector agreed to create scholarships, to have a public statement, and to do a Palestine Studies Observatory. So none of these 3 things have actually been met fully yet, except for the Palestine Studies Observatory. We just announced it the other day. So we're the first country in mainland Europe to have an observatory for Palestine studies. And it's, of course, hopefully one day it'll be similar to the one in Exeter. The scholarships that were promised are actually just tuition waivers, which is great, but it's not what we had hoped and what we had discussed. So we have tuition waivers for 2 Palestinian students, and we have been talking with some different NGOs in Portugal and elsewhere to try to get a monthly cost of living scholarship to supplement these tuition waivers. And so I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but there's an organization called the Gaza Scholarship Initiative, and they've helped place 124 students from Gaza with scholarships at 35 different institutions across 10 different countries last year. So they have a short list of Palestinian students that are ready to go and study at institutions around the world who would like to accept them. And so we have already spoken to them about different programs that might be interested in hosting these students. And so we're trying to move this process along, but the NGO that we've been working with in Portugal to provide the scholarships with, they, for some reason, we obviously know the reason, they want to have an extra bureaucratic process to make sure they get full approval from the government before they agree to these monthly scholarships that they would provide, even though in the past they've done these same scholarships for Ukrainian, Syrian, and Afghani students without this extra bureaucratic process. And unfortunately, there's been a change of government in the last few months in Portugal, so this delayed the process even more because the NGO had meetings set up with the ministers of education, and then those meetings were canceled. So this month we were supposed to be interviewing students from that shortlist, and that hasn't happened yet, unfortunately. So we are hoping that we can still do the interviews next month in July, and then we would have to apply for the visas immediately for the students to be able to arrive in September or October. And if it doesn't happen in this semester, then we're hoping that we can make it happen in the next semester. And I guess something that our student collective has also been involved with recently is a workshop that Dr. Matar was at and spoke at as well. It was called Academic Freedom and Silencing in Times of Genocide. It was an international workshop, and we think that the connections made and the discussions that we had were really important, and we hope to continue these and also expand them into more than just discussions, into actual solidarity actions, because I think we really need to treat solidarity as a verb and not just as a kind of sentiment. And I think even though academia isn't a liberatory space, I think we still have to treat education as something that shouldn't be a machine for propaganda and for murder and for destruction. And so even though we work in these institutions, we are not of them. And so I think we need to take up spaces that we can in academia to, push our collective liberation agendas, and also to interrogate and challenge the structures that are oppressing Palestinians and that are suppressing and repressing our voices and actions against genocide and scholasticide. And I think I should stop there, but thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's amazing. And I've been in touch with you at the university, and I know how, a small group, and I visited the encampment. Yes. Actually, when so it is amazing, and yet another example of how, no matter how small the group is, an individual or a small group, they can really make a difference. And I'm looking forward for more cooperation together in the near future. Definitely. I'm sure we'll be in touch. So thank you so much. I'll now turn to Professor Dina.
Thank you, Nadia. Barry, I know your hand is up. Actually, that was amazing, and it's really great to hear about the achievements and so on. Barry, can I ask a quick question, and maybe you could answer it in with your hand raised. What I wanted to ask is around whether these different initiatives are happening in different spaces, particular universities in particular countries. Do you co-organize across, and how do you do that? In a sense, again, in the United States, do you have like a special way of connecting? And of course, social media platforms play a role, but maybe if we could talk about the easiness or the difficulty of communicating actions, and then maybe everyone can come in with this, because it's about the process. It's about how do you do things and the challenges that you face. So Barry, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah. So I wanted to, before I answer your question, I wanted to touch a little bit on something that Professor Nadia mentioned, and it's the idea of community engagement apart from the university itself. And so I want to talk about our case specifically because it's an extremely unique one. So, Montclair State University in New Jersey is in the heart of the highest concentration of Palestinians in the United States, in terms of Palestinians per capita. And so, along with that fact, we also share a community with the Palestinian American Community Center, which I'm currently, working at. And so being able to use that community leverage in university spaces was extremely, extremely valuable. And so, one thing that we were able to do through the SJP at Montclair was create a community partnership between the university and the center. In my first meeting with university administration in October of 2023, the first thing I said to the university president was, you need to understand that this is a community that sends its students here. And so if you refuse to acknowledge, one, their existence as Palestinians, two, their suffering as Palestinians, and three, their needs, then we have the power to send our students somewhere else. And that was a game changer from the beginning. And so, in terms of community engagement, it comes in hand, like it comes in very handy. And this was a major difference between us and other major universities in the United States. Like the Columbias, like the Harvards, like, all of these other universities who are very much reliant on partnerships with huge donors and politicians, etc. At smaller scale universities like Montclair State, which is a public institution, the second largest in New Jersey, community partnerships and community engagement can be extremely valuable in terms of getting the student movement at that university off the ground. Montclair has zero type of student movement prior to our engagement during this ongoing genocide in Gaza. There was no student-led protests. The first student-led protest ever in the university's history was in October of 2023. And so, this is just kind of like an open thing to keep in mind for any student attendees, for my other panelists. It's extremely valuable to keep that community engagement in hand. Professor Dina, to acknowledge your question, if you could just repeat it one more time. Sorry.
The question is on whether your university coordinates with other universities, whether these universities are the student movements, protest movements in the US or with other universities outside, and maybe or how do you learn from examples of success from other universities, or maybe how do you communicate your own successes, as you mentioned. So perhaps talk about the organization, element of doing things.
Yeah. So one thing I can speak about is, so in January of last year, so in New Jersey there are approximately a dozen, maybe a little more, SJPs at universities in the state. There are a lot more universities, but they're slowly growing. But as of right now, on hand, we have around a dozen. And so in January of last year, at Montclair, and myself and a few other student leaders at different universities, we had started a coalition of New Jersey SJPs. And so we did that within the context of localized organizing and bridging the gaps between the different universities around the state. And so New Jersey is a fairly small state, but with an extremely high population and a dense population as well. And so, you could imagine how a university that might only be an hour away from another has stark differences in terms of strategies, in terms of demands, in terms of university environment. And so we created this coalition to better understand each other and to better understand the climate in which each of us are organizing in. And that has been extremely helpful up until now. At PAC, in my role now, I'm planning a retreat for all of these New Jersey SJPs for the end of the month, where everyone can get together and share strategies and talk about the different initiatives that they want to plan for this upcoming semester. And throughout the year, there's always coordination between the many of us. Aside from just the New Jersey SJP, there is the national network of SJPs. And within this national network, we're all able to share different strategies. We're all able to share different campaign tools. And especially for universities where their SJPs are just getting off the ground, that have started within the wake of this current genocide, as opposed to SJPs that have been around for years and years. This network is very, very strong in the sense of, we're able to pull people up who don't have any organizing experience, and within a semester or two, give them the tools and resources to start their own divestment campaign, to start their own campaign to end relations with a Zionist university. And these are all tools that we've been able to pull together and kind of be able to share with one another. Yeah, I think that was the answer.
Thank you so much. I want to call in Watan, and Watan, you can speak in Spanish because there is translation if you just check on the phone.
Thank you. Bueno, yo voy a contestar la segunda pregunta.
So, what we do as young people and students, we have learned a lot during these 2 years in education, first, and secondly, we have learned what to talk, what to tell the students, and what are we going to teach them on Palestine. There is interest during these 2 years of genocide, accelerated genocide. The interest is there. So what was missing is how to articulate, how to bring the Palestinian cause and take it as an international cause, as what it is in Latin America. Because with the Latin Americans, we share a colonial process, we share a colonization process that is not that far away from Latin America. Cuba was the last colony from Spain until 1963. So many countries, Venezuela, Brazil, Chile, and we have learned a lot from the thoughts and the ideas from Fidel that has always was always talking about the battle of the ideas. And that has helped us to move forward with his thought on the Palestinian cause. When we're going to talk about the concept of revolution, we take the concept of revolution from Fidel, that is saying, revolution is changing everything we need to change and liberate ourselves from ourselves. And that is a concept. And it's been many years since that concept. And if we're going to reflect this into the Palestinian cause, well, it's changing everything we need to change. It's liberate ourselves from all our ties, and it's the interest, it's the humbleness, it's the internationalism, etc. So this same concept can be applied in many contexts, whether it is in our region, whether it is in other regions in the Americas. And another concept that we are able to articulate is why the armed struggle. Why are Palestinians struggling? Why are they resisting? This is something they always ask. Many comrades, they ask us, why don't you leave? Why don't you leave? Because you're being killed. And we take that
context, we take the context, the revolutionary context from Cuba, the Bolivarian concept from Simón Bolivar, and what Fidel used to say, imperialism didn't leave any other way out than armed struggle. And this is the same applicable to Palestine. So we have made a political training course in 8 weeks to our students, and whether they are born Palestinian or they're made Palestinian. And we have called it decolonizing narratives. We know that the Palestinian narrative is the narrative that is predominating now. Where are we struggling? We're struggling in the front of the language, materializing, reliving, and the young people from this side of the world, 11,000 kilometers away from Palestine, they don't know Edward Said, for instance, or Ghassan Kanafani. They don't know him. So what we're doing, we're bringing these historical characters that are organic. They're part of the Palestinian struggle. Ghassan Kanafani, Said, and other martyrs, and we want to bring them up and put a parallel into the Latin American context. So we always say a sentence that the Latin community, they say reincarnation. They talk about reincarnation and they talk about internationalist reincarnation. José Martí said 200 years ago, as Ghassan Kanafani, and we make a comparison of what José Martí in Cuba said with Ghassan Kanafani. So this is what we do. It's a struggle against the same regime. So the role, the main teaching on Palestine is to look for a common ground between the teacher, the educator, and the student, and those that are interested in learning about Palestine. So we can bring all this into their social sphere and speak the same language, not tell them about only our point of view or our language. Sometimes we, as Palestinians, talk to the world only from our side, and with our vocabulary, but we don't understand. We cannot interpret the other's position. So what we need to do is to put a bridge so we can make it simpler for them to understand, make a parallel to their history, to their background.
Para que él nos pueda entender. Y espero que me hayan entendido mejor en español.
Okay, perhaps I'll come here and say thank you. That is really amazing in terms of what you're trying to say, Watan. And I wondered whether Nadia would like to come in and ask another question to the panelists. So I wondered whether Nadia, you want to come in with a question, because we're probably going to be getting some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's great. I was just wondering, you know, several of you mentioned how, especially Ashley, you mentioned, you know, how the university was like lying to a certain extent, the bureaucracy and so on. I think bureaucracy has been used, especially in particular after October 7, as a tool for silencing Palestinians and pro-Palestinians. For example, here in the UK, they introduced the risk assessment form, so that you explain the activity you want to do, you get an approval. So I was wondering if you can briefly just mention, how did you challenge these bureaucratic procedures to proceed with your activities? I know that many universities managed to mitigate that and found creative ways to avoid them and bypass them?
Thank you for that question. I'm not entirely sure we were able to bypass them, but I think we always tried to come very super over prepared. We provided them with information that they didn't know. The rector, the vice rectors that we spoke to didn't even know that there were Israeli partnerships. We provided them with, I'm really good at finding books online for free. And so we provided them with lots of free material, and we reached out to as many people as we possibly could. I work for a small startup, and I work sometimes with the Lisbon City Council. So I reached out to Lisbon City Council members that I met. I asked them for contacts. I contacted all of the ministers, all of the rectorates multiple times. I guess those were our tactics. I'm not sure that they exactly worked, but we definitely got our name out there, and we were able to also, of course, connect with the BDS movement here in Portugal, other student collectives at different universities to organize events on campus. I don't know. I wouldn't say we've been very successful in avoiding those bureaucratic silencing tactics, but we haven't given up. So I don't know if I have a better answer. Sorry.
No, I think you've done great. At least you've achieved some demands. And I know that some universities have managed to do that as well. Some Palestinians and pro-Palestinian groups and unions managed to, at least by putting pressure, as you said, and being so prepared, then they managed to and Nadine mentioned also that they have managed to achieve some of the demands. So yeah, I mean, it's excellent, excellent answer. Thank you. I think we have Abdel Bari. I don't know if anyone else before.
Nadia, I just noticed that there's something in the chat from our audience by somebody called Lance Dayrit. And he's saying, hello, everyone. I'm Lance. I'm a Filipino and a student at the University of the Philippines, Dillman, UP Dillman. I would like to share some of our experiences here in the Philippines. I have been involved in the campaign against genocide and for a free Palestine after October 7, 2023. I became deeply immersed with Palestinian culture and history by translating Palestinian poems in the Filipino language. I was not alone in this endeavor. After October 7, there has been a proliferation of translations of Palestinian poems in Filipino.
Sorry, can you just go to, can you summarize it? Because it's quite long.
Yeah. So, he's just saying that especially after October 7, there has been great interest in Palestinian poetry and translating Palestinian poetry into different languages, especially he's talking about his own language, Filipino, and he mentions Rifat al-Ar'ir's poem, If I Must Die, which was translated into 5 versions in Filipino and 14 vernacular languages. So so this is great to know. Thank you, Lance.
You said there is another one. I can't see them. I couldn't find them.
There's another one from Germany, which also talks about graduate students at the University of Munich. And she says that Wissam Amer's talk, that they met him. We shared with him how difficult organizing has been in Germany and in Munich. And then it was not possible to advertise his lecture and so on. But Eileen says there is a student group called Uni for Palestine Munich, which had an encampment last year. So it'll be good if you could share that with us by email and let us know what is happening there. And thank you so much for that. I have Barry who wants to come in, and then maybe we can ask the other student panelists who haven't spoken if they want to come in. And I know Mouna wants to come in. So Barry and Mouna, if you could make it short and concise, and then we'll see whether we can get others. Nadia, apologies. Do you want to say something?
No, thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy to open it up to anyone who hasn't spoken already. It's fine.
It's okay, Barry. You go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of challenging the bureaucratic procedures within the university, one thing that helped in, I guess, not really circumnavigating them, but more so facilitating them in a much simpler way, or I guess faster way than normal, is creating personal connections with people in the various sectors of the university. I every by the end of by the time I graduated, I more or less knew a person in probably every single department across the university, whether it be in the School of Communications or music or in every single part of the university. I more or less had myself or someone from the organization put their foot there, and that way, making those personal connections made it so much easier to facilitate events, facilitate educational workshops. It was a strategy that played in our favor, especially when it came time to challenge the administration on certain things, because we had the support of people across the university, faculty, staff, and student-wide. And so, making those personal connections with people across the university was extremely valuable, and it's another thing that I would recommend too.
And I know that you introduced them to Palestinian food to teach them about Palestine.
Yeah, I would literally, when we would have like a bake sale, raising funds for, whether it be for like our own organizing or, raising funds for humanitarian aid, we would always have, like Sidr Warbat or Ichnaf or something like that. And when we would have it left over, the first thing I would do is I would just take it upstairs to the Dean of Students office and give it to everybody in the office and be like, here you go, just make sure you say Free Palestine before you eat it, and then just hand it to every single person in the room. Simple gestures like that, they might seem like minuscule, but in a long term, something long term, does really come. It's very valuable. And so that's.
Mouna, I think, wanted to say something, and then for those people who haven't spoken, please, if you'd like to come and say a few words, that would be amazing.
I'm going to be very brief. And I just wanted I heard that Watan was speaking about Ghassan Kanafani, and I think that literature and art is usually a great way to create a grassroots movement and to speak and to make the connection with outside of the higher education platforms. And I wanted to share that it was very important for us to actually bring Palestinian literature in Polish. And I wanted to highlight the work of Bartosz Wojak, who actually was the co-organizer of this festival, who brought the work of Muhammad al-Kurd in Polish. He translated the book, he co-organized the festival, he spoke and introduced this book in Polish. And that was important for people to actually be able, in East Europe and Central Europe, be able to understand the Palestinian cause, not in English, which is not available to everybody, but in their language. And also the work of Hanna Jankowska. She was also one of the guests. And Hanna translated Mahmoud Darwish into Polish, Adania Shavli, and Ghada Samman. This is an important cultural effort for her to actually humanize the Palestinian cause for Polish people, because language can be a barrier sometimes, as people can shut down and say, I do not know enough, I do not want to explore this because I do not speak the language. But if you bring it in the language of the people, then they are able to understand and process and relate. And that's the power of literature and art. And I also would like to actually voice my gratitude to Pavel Hadrian, who is the major contributor to this festival. And again, as a philosopher and a person, my main point person in the cultural center, he started the event with a Polish lesson or a Polish presentation on not only Palestine, but locating Palestine within the Arab world and understanding the Palestinian cause and centering it historically and philosophically. So it's important to actually, for me, when we're involved in activism, not to just be involved in abstract abstract language and languages that people don't speak, but it's important to bring to the community something that they can relate to. And yeah, that.
Thank you so much. We have Wurud. Do you want to speak, say anything, or any other person who hadn't spoken from the students before we hand back to Nadia and to Tahrir? Anyone else would like to say something? We're almost coming, almost 10 minutes to 8 London time. So I wondered whether anyone else would like to say something. Okay, shall I hand over to Tahrir? Nadia, sorry, you want to say?
No, that's okay. I think it's an amazing insight from wonderful students about their amazing efforts.
Voice, Nadia, it's a bit low.
It's amazing to hear insights from these students. And as a Palestinian, I tell you, all these efforts give us hope. And sometimes I feel that we are lucky that we have this strong global solidarity groups that is always with us, supporting us, helping us. It's great. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Also, thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Dina. Thank you, everyone. Also, Wissam, everybody, and all the brilliant students and alumni. And well, many have graduated, of course, and are graduates now. You're all doing great work. And I think one thing that we all need to keep in mind is the idea of liberating Palestine and a free Palestine from the river to the sea, as we say. It really is connected, as Ghassan Kanafani argued so powerfully. It is connected to world revolution as well. The freedom of Palestine is our freedom, is the world's freedom. That is why silencing is so strong. That's why Palestine must be silenced in the West, and Palestine must be silenced in the Arab world and in the East and everywhere you go, because it really is about the freedom of this world, freedom from imperialism and Zionism and slavery and the slavery of man and woman, really. It really is about decolonizing the mind, and it really is about raising awareness, and this is what we meant to do with this webinar, to raise awareness. And the point that Watan made, how all the revolutions really are connected. The indigenous people in Latin America, and you know how even in the United States, and I think Barry mentioned what's happening in LA and Los Angeles as well. I mean, well, whole parts of the United States belonged to Mexico before there was ever a white man who came from across the seas, you know. So the idea of revolution and solidarity as action. And I think Dr. Wissam Ahmed made that point very clear. So also the idea of awareness, not only of knowing and talking, but of doing, of acting, of feeling that you really did make a difference. So free Palestine and free the world and free our minds from imperialism and this very genocidal and what racist Zionist ideology, which is connected to this new world, or not modern world, colonial world order. It all really is very much connected. Thank you all. Thank you all. Great webinar. That's it.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.